wow. Get this. We are diving into some seriously wild claims today from President-elect Trump.
Oh, yeah.
He's talking about taking control of the Panama Canal and Greenland.
Really?
And get this, potentially even using military force to do it.
Wow. Yeah, these statements have really sent shockwaves across the globe. Leaders in Panama and Denmark are not exactly thrilled with the idea, and even Canada's gotten pulled into the mix.
Okay, so let's unpack all of this. Where do we even begin?
Well, first thing to understand is the sheer audacity of these claims.
Right.
I mean, to suggest taking control of another country's territory, especially one like the Panama Canal with such historical and economic significance, is pretty unprecedented for a modern U.S. leader.
Yeah, I mean, he's been pretty open about his intentions, right?
Yeah.
He's publicly stated this interest, claiming it's all about national and economic security for the U.S. And he didn't shy away from mentioning the military might be an option.
Exactly, and that's what makes this so unsettling. Even hinting at the possibility of military force raises serious questions about international law and America's commitment to diplomatic norms.
So what are his specific gripes? Why does he think the U.S. needs to take over these places?
Well, in the case of the Panama Canal, he's called it a disgrace, claiming it's run by China and that U.S. ships are being unfairly charged. As for Greenland, he argues it's crucial for protecting the free world.
Hold on a second. Isn't the Panama Canal run by, Panama?
You're absolutely right. It's managed by the Panama Canal Authority, which is controlled by the Panamanian government, not China.
Okay.
And there's a treaty signed back in 1977 that guarantees all nations are treated equally when it comes to using the canal and paying fees.
Okay, so that debunks that claim. But what about Greenland? What's the real story there?
Well, the U.S. already has a military base in Greenland.
Right.
There's also a long-standing treaty that gives the U.S. significant say in the island's defense. Plus, Greenland is a NATO ally alongside Denmark. It makes you wonder why Trump feels the need to take it over for national security when these agreements already exist.
And how are Panama and Denmark reacting to all of this? I can't imagine they're just rolling over.
You're right, they're not. Both countries have firmly rejected the idea of handing over their territory.
Right.
Panama's president stated quite clearly that the canal is going to stay in our hands forever.
Wow.
Denmark's prime minister was equally direct, saying, Greenland is not for sale.
It sounds like this is already causing some serious diplomatic headaches.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
This situation brings up a lot of questions about the U.S.'s relationship with its allies and the potential consequences of such bold pronouncements, even if they don't actually lead to any action.
Speaking of consequences,
Right.
Trump keeps bringing up the 1977 Panama Canal Treaty that was signed by President Carter. He seems pretty critical of that whole deal.
Yes, he's slammed Carter for giving away the canal for $1 and claims that the U.S. isn't being treated fairly. But, as we already touched on, the treaty ensures neutrality and equal treatment for all nations using the canal.
Right.
It doesn't seem like his criticism is based on the reality of the situation.
It's almost like he's trying to rewrite history to fit his own narrative.
There's definitely an element of that. It's crucial to look at the historical and legal context surrounding these claims. For instance, the U.S. Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the sole power to declare war.
Right.
So Trump's threats to use military force raise serious questions about the legality of such actions.
And we can't forget about the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama. Doesn't that play into this whole conversation?
Absolutely. That intervention, while ultimately leading to the removal of General Manuel Noriega, was condemned by the United Nations as a violation of international law. It serves as a stark reminder of the potential blowback and international condemnation that can follow unilateral military action.
Yeah, it's incredible how a single statement can trigger so much tension on a global scale.
I know, right?
I mean, even if these land grabs are highly unlikely, the fact that they're even being considered has to have some kind of impact.
Right. Yes, that's a key point. Even if nothing comes of these claims, they still create a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
And can erode trust between nations. I mean, imagine you're a leader in Panama or Denmark. How would you feel knowing the U.S. is contemplating taking over your territory? It's not exactly conducive to fostering strong diplomatic ties.
Yeah, it's interesting. Trump's rhetoric reminds me of a poker player going all in with a questionable hand. Is he bluffing, or does he really have the cards to back it up?
It's hard to say for sure what his true motives are. Some experts believe he's intentionally trying to provoke reactions to shake things up on the global stage and see how other countries respond.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like he's testing the waters, seeing how far he can push the boundaries before encountering real resistance.
Exactly. And it's not just limited to these territorial claims. He's also floated the idea of using economic pressure to get what he wants. Remember his suggestion that Canada should become the 51st state?
Oh yeah, that didn't go over too well with Canada's prime minister, did it?
Not at all. He firmly rejected the idea, emphasizing the strong partnership between the two countries, which would obviously be jeopardized by such a move.
And wouldn't the USMCA trade agreement create some serious roadblocks for Trump if he tried to impose tariffs on Canada?
Absolutely. The USMCA, which was actually negotiated under the Trump administration, includes provisions that make it much harder to just slap tariffs on other member countries without facing consequences. There are specific mechanisms in place to ensure fairness and prevent one country from using economic coercion against another.
So in a way, his own trade deal is limiting his options here.
Yeah,
It's almost ironic, isn't it?
it does seem a bit paradoxical, but it highlights the complexities of international relations. Actions often have unintended consequences, and even the most carefully crafted plans can be undermined by existing agreements or the pushback of other nations.
Okay, but let's go back to those claims about the Panama Canal for a second.
Right.
I'm still hung up on his insistence that U.S. ships are being overcharged.
Yeah.
I thought the whole point of the 1977 treaty was to ensure fair treatment for everyone using the canal.
That's right. The treaty explicitly prohibits any discrimination based on nationality when it comes to canal usage fees. Those fees are determined by the size and type of vessel, not the country it's from.
And the Panama Canal Authority has been very clear that they adhere to these rules, right?
Absolutely. They've repeatedly stated that they treat all ships equally regardless of origin. So, Trump's claims seem to be based on a misunderstanding or perhaps even a deliberate misrepresentation of the facts.
Which makes you wonder what his end game is. Is he genuinely misinformed, or is he intentionally distorting the truth to serve his own agenda?
That's the million-dollar question. It's difficult to know for sure what's going on behind closed doors, but what we can do is analyze his words and actions, compare them to the historical record, and try to understand the potential consequences of his rhetoric regardless of his true intentions.
And speaking of questionable claims, what about his assertion that China is running the Panama Canal?
Yeah.
I mean, we already established that the Panama Canal Authority is controlled by Panama, not China.
Precisely. While it's true that China has been increasing its economic influence in Panama and the surrounding region, there's no evidence whatsoever to support the claim that they're secretly controlling the canal.
It almost feels like he's trying to create a boogeyman to justify his actions. If you can convince people that China is pulling the strings, it might be easier to rally support for a takeover.
That's a valid interpretation. It's a classic tactic to stoke fears and play on existing anxieties to gain public support for a particular course of action. But in this case, it seems like he's stretching the truth, if not outright fabricating it, to fit his narrative.
You know, this whole situation has me thinking about the bigger picture. Is this just about Trump and his ambitions? Or is it a symptom of something larger happening in the world?
That's a great question, and I think the answer is that it's a bit of both. On the one hand, you have Trump's personality and his unique approach to foreign policy, which is often characterized by brash pronouncements and a disregard for traditional diplomatic norms.
He's definitely not afraid to ruffle some feathers.
That's for sure.
Yay.
But on the other hand, you have these broader global trends like the rise of nationalism and populism, which are challenging the existing world order and leading to increased tensions between countries.
It feels like the old rules no longer apply. We're entering uncharted territory, and it's hard to predict what the future holds.
You're right. It's a time of great uncertainty and change. And the choices that leaders make in the coming years will have a profound impact on the shape of the world to come.
It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
Yeah,
But it's also fascinating to witness these events unfold and try to make sense of it all.
I agree. It's a challenging but also intellectually stimulating time to be alive. And it's more important than ever to stay informed, think critically, and engage in these crucial conversations about the future of our world.
Well said. And speaking of engaging in conversation, remember how Trump mentioned renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America? It's a small detail compared to everything else, but it's still a pretty striking statement.
You're right, it is. And even though it's a symbolic gesture, symbols can be powerful.
Yeah.
It speaks to this desire to assert American dominance, to reshape the world in his image.
It's like he's trying to plant a flag and claim ownership, even if it's just in name only.
Exactly. And while it may not have any immediate practical implications, it's a reminder of the importance of language and perception in shaping geopolitical realities.
It's all very unsettling, to be honest.
Right.
But it's important to stay informed and critically analyze the information we're receiving.
I completely agree. We can't afford to be passive observers. We need to engage, ask questions, and hold our leaders accountable.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. So share your thoughts with us in the comments. Subscribe to the show so you don't miss any more of these deep dives.